Welcome back to All Things Lord of the Rings. I'm your host Alex, also known as Solanus Dracone. Today marks a small shift in the structure of these videos, as I'm going to try to cover the events of an entire chapter in each sitting if possible. This means the videos will likely be a bit longer and will also be a bit more in-depth. I feel that this is the best way to relate the story to you all, and I hope you all don't mind the change of pace. So, last episode, we talked about how the city of Gondolin was founded, and how Galadriel and Melian had a little chat. Melian talked to Thingol about that chat, and they let it be for the moment. I said that was the last they spoke of it, but that's not the last that was spoken of it. Now, the subject of why the Noldor left Aman in the first place was bugging Thingol pretty hard. And he wasn't the only one. Everyone in Beleriand was talking about it, and when you have that many people talking about it, rumors are going to start creeping up. Speculation time. Some of this was due to Morgoth, ostensibly through his little elf puppets that he cowed into submission, and the rest just probably the normal rumor mill. Back in those days, elves were a bit more trusting with what they heard through the grapevine, having not really learned about manipulation yet, it would seem. Círdan, Lord of the Havens, managed to weed out the meat and potatoes of the situation, however, and though he knew in his heart that these rumors were born of malice, he guessed wrongly that the malice came from the princes of the Noldor. I'm not sure why he came to the conclusion that the princes of the Noldor would incriminate themselves, but it's indicated in the book that he thought it was because they were jealous and hating on each other. Anyways, he sent the information he had put together along to Thingol. Now, would you believe at this time, the sons of Finarfin were visiting with Thingol, checking in on Galadriel and just hanging out with family. Thingol went off on them. "Finrod," he said, "you're dead to me, boy. Keeping the truth from me. I'm on to you guys now." And Finrod was, "Well, what have we ever done to you?" And Thingol was like, "I marvel at you, son of Eowyn. You'd come into my house, sit at my table with your family, straight off from killing some of your own people back in Aman, and you're not even going to say a damn thing in your defense or even ask for forgiveness?" Finrod had nothing to say to that, because it was true, and also because he'd be snitching on the other Noldor if he said anything. Angrod, however, remembered Caranthir talking that bitter mess, and then the finger-pointing began. "My lord," he shouted, "I don't know what bullshit you heard or where you heard it from, but we're not red-handed. Ain't none of this on us, except that maybe we fell for Fëanor's nonsense. We did no wrong and suffered pretty fecking hard, and we still forgave the sons of Fëanor. Remember, they had to do that nasty march across Helcaraxe. Anyhow, Angrod spilled the beans. He told about the kinslaying and the ship burning and ended with, "Why should we, who cross the grinding ice, be called kinslayers?" At that point, Melian chirped up, "Yeah, but you've got the shadow of Mandos on you." And Thingol, who had been silent while listening to Angrod, spoke up. "You guys gotta go. Right now I am pretty ticked off. I ain't throwing you out forever, because I wouldn't do that to family, and you guys were just caught up in Fëanor's crap, but I'm still mad. I'll even still be friends with Fingolfin and his people, because they atoned for their sins with what they endured. But I don't ever want to hear the language of those bastard kinslayers spoken again, so you guys gotta give up speaking Quenya, and you can't speak it anywhere that I have command over. I'ma send messengers all over my kingdom to all of the Sindarin, and anyone caught speaking or even listening to Quenya is gonna be considered a kinslayer." And so the sons of Finarfin left Menegroth with heavy hearts. This was just another example of how the doom of Mandos was going to darken their lives, and most especially it drove home just how much it applied to Fëanor's people. As to Quenya, well, it pretty much fell out of use in Beleriand from then on, and only the princes of the Noldor spoke it, and only to each other. But it still remained a language of lore, sort of like Latin in our modern world. Now, the book ends this chapter by saying how Galadriel went to go visit Finrod and Nargothrond and how they had a talk. Galadriel seemed to be quite the chatterbox in those days. Subject was why Finrod didn't have a wife. His response was to swear an oath that he never would take a wife and not have a son either, because he didn't want anything of his realm to survive that a son should inherit. He was kind of seeing some dark future there, you can tell. Anyways, the real reason was because the lady he loved, Amarie, was a Vanyar lady, and she did not follow him into exile. Sad. I'm going to cover one more subject in this video, and that is the chapter devoted to a specific elf named Maeglin. The story starts in Gondolin, with a woman named Aradhel Arfiniel. She was one of the daughters of Fingolfin, and she went with Turgon when they all moved to Gondolin. That life didn't suit her, however, as she longed to go roam in the wide forests of Beleriand again, and as you might recall, Turgon didn't want anybody to leave Gondolin, ever. About 200 years after Gondolin was done being built, Turgon finally got bored of her pestering him and was all, "Fine, you can go out, but you can only go to see our brother Fingon, and anyone I send with you is coming back right the hell away as soon as they want." Aradhel didn't like this. She was all, "I'm your sister, not your servant. You don't own me, and I'll go wherever I damn well please. And if you don't like sending an escort with me, I'll go myself." Turgon replied, "Look, I don't grudge you anything, but I just don't want anyone leaving who knows the way back. I trust you, but I don't trust anyone else that much to keep their mouths shut." So he sent 3 trusted lords of his household to go with her, and told them to bring her to Hithlum and to be careful, because even though Morgoth was holed up in the north, there were still a lot of dangers in the world that Aradhel didn't know anything about. Aradhel wasn't going to have any of this, and as they got to the ford of Brithiac in the river Sirion, she changed course, saying they were going to go south to find the sons of Fëanor, who were her old friends. Since they couldn't very well say no to her as she outranked them, they went along with it. They tried to cut through Doriath, but the wardens of the land weren't having it. They were all, "Nope, no friends of the House of Fëanor in this land. Go around, bitch." So they chose the north border because it was the shortest route, but it was also pretty damn dangerous. It ran close to Nan Dungortheb, which you might potentially recall was where Ungoliant retired to after she parted ways with Morgoth. Would you believe that area was full of darkness and spider monsters? She got separated from her escort and lost, and they couldn't find her again. They had to turn tail and run from the children of Ungoliant and return to Gondolin with the sad news: Aradhel was lost. Aradhel, however, didn't afraid of anything, and she rode right the hell on. She made it, believe it or not, to the land of Himlad, which was looked over by Celegorm and Curufin, 2 of the sons of Fëanor. And there she was welcomed. But the brothers were out doing a long patrol. A really long patrol. Remember, the sons of Fëanor were the first line of defense against Angband. Those patrols could last years. She stayed about a year in Himlad, but she got bored of waiting for Celegorm and Curufin to come back, so she started wandering a bit further. Eventually, she wandered into the land of Nan Elmoth, which is where Melian and Thingol first met long ago. In that land lived an elf named Eol. Folks called him the Dark Elf because he didn't really care for sunlight. He much preferred the night and the stars. He didn't like the Noldor because he blamed them for bringing Morgoth back to Beleriand, and he didn't really get along with the Sindarin either, because they had a bit too much joy of the sun. He did like dwarves, though. The dwarves and him got along just fine. He even hung out in the strongholds of Nogrod and Belagast on occasion, and he was their main source of news for the goings-on of the elves. Anyway, he found Aradhel wandering around the border of Nan Elmoth and wanted her. So he did a little bit of shadow magic, and basically closed off all other paths except for those to his house, which she eventually found. And he married her, and none of her family heard from her again for a long time. Now, Aradhel wasn't entirely unhappy with this setup. She actually had it fairly nice there for a while, though Eol didn't allow her sunlight anymore. Nan Elmoth was a land where the sun didn't reach because the trees were too thick, so it wasn't hard to do that. He even let her wander around on her own as she wanted, as long as she didn't seek the sunlight or try to go see the sons of Fëanor. They had a son, which she named Lomion in the Quenya language, but Eol was old school and he didn't give his son a name until he was 12. Remember, that's a thing that elves did. He named his son Maeglin, which means sharp glance, because the kid's eyes seemed pretty sharp and could see the true intent of people who spoke. While he did hang out with his daddy quite a bit, and did go visit the dwarves with him and learned about smithing, because Eöl was all about some smithing, he didn't really like his dad all that much. He was a mama's boy, and he would spend all his time with her while Dad was out, and she told him stories of the flight of the Noldor and all that good stuff. One of the things he latched onto most tightly was that Turgon didn't have an heir. Turgon's wife, Elenwe, had died in the crossing of Helcaraxe, and the only child he had was Idril, who was a lady, and these being the days of old, girls didn't inherit stuff. As she told these stories, Eredhel began to miss her family, and to her own surprise, she realized that she missed the splendor of Gondolin, and the sunlight, and all that good stuff she had turned her back on. She lived a pretty lonely life, stuck at home, often all by herself when Eöl took Maeglin along while he was out. Maeglin pestered her to tell her where Turgon lived and how to get there, but she never told him. He even came clean to Eöl regarding his dreams of meeting his kin, but Papa wasn't having it, telling him, "You're my kin, not theirs. This land belongs to the Teleri, and I won't have you getting friendly with those kinslayers, those invaders of our home. If you disobey me, I will put you in bonds." Maeglin was broody after that, and never went traveling with his dad. One day, Eöl was off feasting at Nagrod, as he was invited to the midsummer feast there. Maeglin and Eredhel were off wandering while he was gone, and Maeglin decided he had enough of this life. So he talked his mom into leaving, reasoning that they were both basically slaves to Eöl, and he'd learned all he was going to from his dad, so why not just flipping take off? Would you believe Eredhel was just fine with that? And so they set off, with Gondolin as their goal. Eöl came back only about 2 days after they decided to go, and he was definitely unhappy about the situation. He was so mad, he even ignored his photophobia and went off after them in broad daylight. Unfortunately for him, he got caught by Curufin, and Curufin did not like him. He was basically like, "So, what you doing out in the sunlight in my lands?" And Eöl, knowing the bad situation he was in, decided not to talk any shit. Instead he was all, "Just following my wife and son. Heard they came to see you, thought I'd come with." Curufin was like, "Lol, yeah, if they came with you, we'd not have been as friendly to them. They gone, man. You trying to put one over on me? Unless you've been deceived, I think they're running from your ass." And so Eöl dropped the charade and asked if he could go after them. And Curufin told him, "Don't let the door hit you. We don't consider you family, and you're lucky I'm not in a killing mood. If I were you, I'd go home, because if you keep on after them, you probably won't ever get back home." So Eöl burned rubber after his wife and son, pretty damn pissed off by how he'd been cucked like that. Eredhel and Maeglin made it back to Gondolin, and there was much rejoicing because everyone there had thought she was dead. And Turgon liked Maeglin, saw him as a right and true prince of the Noldor. He welcomed the boy in, and Maeglin swore allegiance, took in all the splendor of the city, loved it, all that good stuff. But his eyes were always focused on Idril. Eöl, however, managed to track them all the way to Gondolin, and the guards there were none too pleased that someone from outside found their hidden city. They went and fetched Turgon, and Eredhel was kinda nervous about it, but she admitted that yeah, Eöl was her husband. She asked them not to kill him, but to bring him in to face the king's judgment, if Turgon was cool with that. Turgon was plenty cool with that, and welcomed Eöl in like family with a hearty handshake, saying he was welcome here, but he couldn't leave. Those were the rules. Eöl, however, was not cool with that. He yoinked his hand back and was all, "I don't recognize your rules. You and the other Noldor don't have any right to be here claiming lands and shit. This is the land of the Teleri. I came to find my wife and son and take them back. Since she's your sister, you've got a claim to keeping her here, but you don't have the right to my son. I want him back. Boy, come on, we're going." Maeglin, however, completely ignored him. Turgon was not impressed. He was all, "I'm not going to debate with you, Dark Elf. It's because of the Noldor that your lands are defended against Morgoth. You owe your peace and freedom to us. You have 2 choices. You either live here or you die here, and the same goes for your son." Eöl, however, was beyond logic at this point, and so he said, "I'll take the second choice for myself and my son," and grabbed a javelin from beneath his cloak and threw it at Maeglin. Aradel, however, jumped in front of it and took it in the shoulder for her son. Eöl was grabbed and trussed up and prepared for trial the next day. Aradel and Idril both asked Turgon to be merciful, but unfortunately, even though it seemed like a small wound, it was a poison javelin, and she died in the night. Well, that obviously was not a point in Eöl's favor, and his judgment was to be executed. They took him up to the Caragdur, which was a big black rock on the north side of the hill, and Maeglin watched and said nothing the whole time. Eöl's final words, verbatim, were, "So you forsake your father and his kin, ill-gotten son. Here shall you fail of all your hopes, and here may you yet die the same death as I." And he was tossed from the hill and he died. All the people of Gondolin agreed justice had been done. Everyone except Idril, who wasn't very happy with how things went, and started to suspect that Maeglin might possibly have some similar darkness in him. But Maeglin prospered in Gondolin, learning everything he could, and even teaching them a thing or two about smithing, if you can believe it. He found some good ore in the mountains around the city, and was able to help make their weapons even stronger with it. He was wise and fearless and well respected by the populace. He had only one sadness about him, and that was the fact that he loved Idril, and the elves didn't like family marrying that close. Just like real life, they didn't even think of it as being appropriate. And Idril wasn't exactly crazy about Maeglin, and he knew it, and this made him even sadder. This sadness grew in his heart slowly over time, until it turned into bitterness, and he started doing all the work he could to gain power and influence in the city. And thusly, even in the heart of Gondolin, the fairest of elven cities in the east, a dark seed of evil was born. Whew, holy moly, that was a long one. But I'm glad I was able to do it. The previous chapter needed closing up, and this whole chapter needed to be covered in one sitting. Which is good, because that lines us up to cover the next chapter next week. Thank you all for watching. Once again, I am Alex, also known as Solanus Dracone, and this has been All Things Lord of the Rings. Goodbye.